Hi, everybody. Welcome to Fraction's next peer-to-peer webinar, a new series in 2025, where I'm sure we'll be delving into many issues around pharma in the weeks and months to come. So thank you for joining, and also look out for many webinars as we go into the months ahead with Fraction. So maybe next slide. Yeah. So just to say a few words around Fraction to begin with, just to set out our bold ambition once again. We were in the business of changing how pharma works. A really bold ambition, but we're doing that by creating a global community of really pharma experts working together, exchanging knowledge and skills, and very often offering consultancy services behind that. We're connected together to deliver projects and really solve any problem. And we can do that as individual consultants, or we can team together to actually provide very unique solutions to our clients. And in doing so, really beginning to shape the new future for the biopharma industry and how we work. So that's setting the scene for Fraction. I think probably what comes out of that is our webinars, really putting or showcasing the deep expertise we have around the network. And on that, maybe the next slide, Pam, just to introduce you. So welcome, Pam Cusick, who will be presenting today, a member of Fraction's network. I'll let you introduce your topic area, but just say something about Pam. So Pam brings over 3 decades of research expertise to her role as Senior Vice President at the Rare Patient Voice. Pam's career spans study design, implementation analysis, with particular depth in public health communications and research. Pam's commitment to research actually extends beyond her professional work, where she serves as past president of the Board of Directors and Scientific Advisory Council lead for the Horses and Human Research Foundation. And just chatting to Pam a little bit more about that fascinating area of research, putting horses together with patients and people suffering from PTSD, cerebral palsy, etc. So maybe Pam will touch upon some of that work that she does with the Horses and Patients Foundation in her story around the patient voice. So with that, Pam, over to you.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me. I don't know whether I'll talk about the horses and humans research, but if anyone has questions, feel free to email me. I'd be happy to chat with you about it. It's very, very interesting and very good work. Today we're going to be talking about patient voices and including patients in research and what they like and what their concerns are and so on. I'm going to talk about a couple different research studies that we have done internally. But before I do that, I just wanted to give a little overview on Rare Patient Voice. So at Rare Patient Voice, we connect patients and family caregivers with all kinds of research opportunities, everything from focus groups and interviews and surveys to clinical trials. We connect with patients by going to events, and we also have an internal patient advocacy team that helps us to identify patients who want to be involved in research. At this point, we have over 180,000 patients and caregivers. They're across 1,500 conditions, and they are now in 9 countries. And we are ever expanding and hoping to identify more patients who want to participate in research. Um, the why around patients. Patients are the experts in their conditions. They know more in many cases than their doctors do about their day to day and what they experience and what they need. They want to be involved in research and be included in decisions about their health and about their conditions. But a lot of times patients don't know that they can be involved. So when we go to events, we'll go to, for example, here in the US, the National Hemophilia Foundation Conference or National Sickle Cell Conference, and patients will come up and ask what we do, and we'll explain it, and they'll say, "Gosh, I didn't know I could share my expertise," which is, um, great that we have an opportunity to let them know. And our mission is really to connect with as many patients as we can to help them understand that they can be involved in research. And my personal mission is to connect with all the clients who should be including patients at every stage of the development process. So, we try to do that from both ends and get the patients involved and let clients know that patients want their voices to be heard. So, today I'm going to talk about two different internal studies that we do. And so at Rare Patient Voice, we do a few of them a year. And the primary reason is to keep patients engaged, but also to share the research back with them. One of the things you'll see later from these two studies is that patients really want to hear the results of the work that they're involved in. And a lot of times that doesn't happen for a variety of reasons. But, we try to give a little bit back to them so that they understand what they're involved in and what how their voice is impacting research. So um, when they participate, they're not getting compensated for these internal studies, but by way of compensation, we actually give them the research, the slides, and any other information that they want. So the two studies I'm going to talk about today are one is communication preferences in clinical trials. And that one was done with patients in the US, patients and family caregivers, I should say. So that's like moms or dads of younger children or adult children taking care of their parents. And so there were 1,147 people participated in that. The second one is a market research focused study and understanding what their preferences are in market research. That one was done in the UK with 369 patients and family caregivers. Um, so before I'm going to launch into the results of these studies, but two things. One, for anybody who's interested, we are always happy to provide the de-identified data for these studies. So at the end, I'll provide my contact information. If you like the data set, please reach out to me. We're happy to share that with you. All we ever ask is that if you use the information, you mentioned that Rare Patient Voice was involved or that these patients came from Rare Patient Voice. So we're happy to do that. And also, if you have any questions during the presentation, we're going to have a Q&A session at the end. But if you have any questions midway, raise your hand and Paul or Nigel will grab you and you can ask your questions. So um, I'm sharing just a subset of all the data that we collected. So I tried to pull the things that were kind of common between the two different studies, which is pretty interesting because, they're very different, obviously, clinical trials and market research, but you'll find a lot of commonalities. So for I'm going to as I go through these, we'll shift back between the different studies. So for one of the things we asked about clinical trials was why people wanted to participate. And I should say that about a third of the patients who responded had participated in a clinical trial and two-thirds had not. So of those who have participated, the main reasons that they participate are they want to help other people. They also want to advance research. They are aware that it might not help them or come up with a cure or a treatment in their lifetime, but they want to at least, be part of making a difference and hopefully making, that research push a little further towards cures and treatments. And also, they're interested in getting compensated for their time and for travel and so on. And interestingly, for market research, patients also were very interested in similar things. So they participate because they want to be involved in developing future treatments.
Oh, great. Thank
They want to help with research, to improve their own disease or their own condition too. Sharing their experiences and expressing their opinions were important. And of course, then one thing that we hear often is they really like to learn about things that are new, that are coming up. So, some of the research they might participate in might talk about new products coming on the market or a new device that's being, manufactured, and they get to learn a little bit of like a a sneak peek of what's coming up next. So that's interesting. And then, of course, financial compensation also was another reason that they participated. We also wanted to know from the broader groups what would be things that would encourage them to participate in clinical trials. And interestingly, one of the most important things for them is that they want information about the trial and its goals. I think that they're not always, they're being asked to participate in something because they have a particular condition, but they really want to know the why. Yes, it's because I have X condition, but what is the goal of the trial and what is, what maybe a little more information around that. A couple things that will encourage them to participate, reimbursement for their travel, their meals, compensation for their time, which isn't always, I know some trials do provide that and some don't, but that is something that would encourage people to participate. As I mentioned earlier, they like to receive the results. So once they've gone through a trial, don't leave them hanging. They want to know what happened. So that's another thing that would encourage participation. Assurance of safety and confidentiality is also important. And then another thing that we had heard in a prior study is that patients like to learn about trials from their providers. So it's not surprising here that support from their healthcare providers is also a very important thing for the patients. Factors that encourage participation in market research studies really hovered around convenience, things that they want to be able to complete things at home or on their own time, do online interviews or online focus groups. Um, you know, Providing this study results was also important, as it was in the prior study. But most of the market research results here seem to, or people who participate in market research seem to hover around things that were made things convenient, made it easy for them to participate. And then, of course, financial reward and being again, the length of the study and so on. So that's a little bit different than the clinical trials, but still, some of the things are the same. We also asked about their concerns. So this is, an important for clinical trials, of course, safety and side effects. Again, similar things. They want to know, travel logistics. They're concerned, do they have to fly across the country? If they have a wheelchair, how's it going to get there? How are they going to get from the airport to the clinical trial site? Things like that are really important for them to understand up front. Costs are another important factor. And then, of course, understanding the trial process, which we saw a little bit before. Knowing what's happening from
Le
day
temps
one.
n'a pas été littéraire pour moi.
What are the
Le temps, on voit pas de tampon, très peu.
how much time is going to be expected of them? Or do they need to come in monthly? Do they need to come in, semi-annually? That just giving them that information up front is really important because it's something that, weighs on their minds. And then, of course, privacy and confidentiality. Now, interestingly, in the next slide, you'll see that the thing that market research clients or sorry, clients, patients are mostly concerned about is privacy and data security. So that was the least of the concerns for the market research or for the clinical trial patients. But in this group, they were very concerned with the security of their data. Um, some of the other things they mentioned were not qualifying, how much time it might take, if it was relevant to them. And I think for most studies, people are compensated, but maybe they aren't compensated for all the research they participate in. So that also was very important. And then getting their compensation on time also came up as a not a high priority, but also it came up as some of their concerns. Um, the final thing that we asked them was how they wanted to learn about the research. So um, I know for at least here in the US, the clinical trials, off you'll hear things on the radio. They also have them, on Facebook and things like that. But by and large, they want to hear about it through email. And, I don't have a follow-up on this, but I'm guessing it's because they have time to digest the information and understand what it's all about, what it means for them, and how they might participate. So that is important information. If you're trying to recruit for trials, certainly contact them by email. Market research participants feel the same way. They also want to learn about studies via email. Um, some are happy to learn about it in other ways, but by and large, most of them want to hear about it via email. So for the some of the takeaways that we have here from this research were, provide clear communications about purpose and timelines and what the expectations are. They want to understand the goals. We have a couple of quotes here. I'm happy to share these slides too if anybody wants them. But understanding what the goals are up front is really important. Providing compensation for their time, but also for their, for their out-of-pocket costs. It's a lot to go across the country or, to another country in some cases. And, the costs are can be, extensive. So helping them with that is really important. Um, Making the process accessible, accommodating different abilities, and helping them. For example, if it's you're doing a focus group and it's you have people who have mobility issues, take that into account. Maybe do it online. Um, Another thing that was interesting and I think is very important is that they want researchers to be empathetic, to know about their condition and to care about their condition and and have some compassion for what they're going through. And again, providing timely feedback and follow up on studies is really important. They want to know how they're making a difference. They're spending their time, whether it's in a clinical trial or if it's in, a market research study. They're spending their time, whether or not they're being compensated. They still want to know what's going on, and I think it's it's a nice thing to do, but I think it makes them feel valued. Um, and then finally, what can researchers do to make things better for patients, make more patients want to participate, and in the case of clinical trials, stay enrolled in a trial. One thing, make it meaningful. They want to know how that research is going to help not only them, but other people who have the same condition. So sharing that information up front is really important. Making it convenient for them. If there's something, in a clinical trial, for example, that can be done locally instead of making them travel, very important to do. Same thing with market research. If it can be done online and makes their lives, or giving them a choice, if they want to do something online versus come into a facility, it's an important thing to give them that opportunity to make things more convenient for them. Guarantee or let them know that their data will be kept secure. So I know, we know internally that, we are protecting their data and some of the checks and balances that go on internally. Maybe we should share that with the patients and let them know how are we protecting their data so that they know that up front. Um, I think it's common, we already know, so we assume people know that we're doing the right thing, but they don't always know that. So sharing that would be very important. Keeping them engaged and informed, let them know what's going on. If there's it's a multi-stage market research study, give them updates, let them know, what the next thing is that's going to happen because they want to know. And then use email to contact them is a very important thing that we found. Um, so with that, if you have any questions, I'm happy to take questions. Um, I'm happy to share the data. If you want to send an email over to me, I can share the de-identified data with you. Um, and that is what we have.
Well, thank you, Pam, providing those fascinating insights, of course, from a patient perspective. Of course, they're our end user end of the day. Are you in a clinical trial or taking a prescribed medication? So it's their voice that we need to listen to paramedicals. Just looking at the chat, I don't know if anybody wants to come online and ask a question, but just some initial comments around logistics of the clinical trials and patients traveling long distances, etc., and getting timely reimbursement for that. I guess that's sort of our experience in the industry, that felt those frustrations from patients that have participated in clinical trials. So I guess some comments around that. I don't know, any sort of would you like to allude a little bit more around logistics, how we can try and make things simpler, what you hear from patients around that?
Sure. So, hearing from patients who I know, I can think of two examples. One was a woman who was in a trial for Fabry disease and it went on for 12 years. And she traveled back and forth to another state for, I don't know how often. It wasn't every month, but, fairly several times a year. And at the time, she didn't, it's very important because it was a disease that ran in her family, and she wanted to try to make things better for her family and, people coming after her. But um, all she did when she went to that site was they did an updated health history and took blood work. And, if we think to now, she could have done that at a local hospital, or somebody could have done, the health history online and then sent her to, a partner hospital that was not a flight away from her. So those are, I think as researchers, we look at the things that, oh, we really need this information. We need the updated history. Yes, you do. And we need the blood. Yes, we do. But is there a better way to get it to make it more convenient for that patient? And I think we need to think of things like that. Um, and in some cases, it may not be possible. I had another friend who's has a child who has Duchenne muscular dystrophy, and the one trial that was available was across the country. Well, you have to get your wheelchair there, and making sure that you have somebody, an accessible mode of transportation ready to pick them up at the hospital is very important. Not, you can't just get an Uber that, is going to pick up, any Uber isn't going to just pick up your wheelchair. So having, there are lots of, I know several companies that's what they do is manage the logistics for patients. They provide cards that have a certain amount of money on them to cover meals and hotels and things like that. But it's even bigger than that, making sure that you know, look ahead and say, okay, well, if this child and her parent or his parent traveling across the country multiple times with a wheelchair, how are we going to make sure that we get them accessible transportation? How are we going to get them to a hotel that's accessible? All those things should be figured out up front.
Mm.
It's hard enough for the patient and their caregiver. There are companies that do that, and we should make use of those companies. If you want to keep patients, if you want them to enroll and you want them to stay in your trial, make it easy for them.
Mm. I remember Pam working on IPF trials, and one of the common protocol areas was a 6-minute walk test in patients that were debilitated with lung function. And if they had a long walk to the clinic, they couldn't do a 6-minute walk test because they'd just done one. So
Right? They've already done it.
you realize logistics are so important. And also when, especially in America, we've got a question about the research's number of countries, but in America, a visit may be a day's travel to, a day's
Mhm.
travel with, and a day's travel back. And as you say, if you haven't thought about it, not only is there suitability to join the trial, but there's suitability to stay in the trial because it becomes too onerous. The quick question that just come up, the result, the research you presented, US only, or what was the mix internationally? Just to
So
remind students.
the clinical trial study was just in the US, and the study on the market research participants was just in the UK.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Pam, if I may, forgive me, I'm camera off because I've got poor broadband. A really good discussion and presentation. You talked earlier a little bit around the sort of desire from patients who are involved in studies or market research to see the outcomes of that, and you see that particularly in small populations where they get repeatedly asked by different companies very, very similar questions. Could you just give and sort of elaborate on some guidance or some thoughts on how we could recommend to companies that the need to share this data versus the need for confidentiality from a company point of view, or in a clinical trial setting from the fact that they can't share that data, to try to help manage those individual patients and also the sort of sponsoring company and manage their expectations?
Sure. So I think, some of the obviously there's a lot of data collected in clinical trials. A lot of, market research studies can, you know, it is their, their bread and butter, right? They don't want to share, their market intelligence. But there may be some bits and pieces of that research that can be shared that would help the patients feel involved and help them understand maybe how their data is being used. It doesn't have to be individual results. It could be more of a um, like an executive summary, right? The general outcomes from a trial or the overarching themes in a market research study that doesn't give away the farm, right? You're not
Yeah.
giving away all of your competitive intelligence, but but sharing something so that they know what they did mattered. We pay patients $120 an hour, or the equivalent in other countries, and that's great. But most of them say that they would do it without being paid because they want to help other people and they want to be part of something bigger. So I think, in sharing with clients, often we hold all of this very close to our chest and that, well, we can't share this data because, it's our data.
Mm.
But, maybe look at what pieces of that are kind of broad brush that would not give away some sort of, um, you know, secret that you don't want, want shared, but so that the patients can feel, oh, look, there were, 1,100 patients, other people who participated in the study. And guess what? They want to hear that information by email too.
Yeah.
That's not super secret, but, it helps them understand that other people, how do other people like them think? And I think it's that even just a little bit would be helpful.
No, thank you. No, I agree. And I think also sharing some of the basic information, certainly from working in rare diseases for 10 years, the frustration at always being asked the same question, and being able to share that at a higher level might actually then remove some of that repeating questions to a small population. So, no, thank you. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Gordon, for the question. Any other questions? Hot topic?
I'll ask a question.
Hi,
Actually, I'll
Bruce.
make a comment first. I've actually worked with Pam's company on a few times over the years, and I will say they're a lovely company to deal with and very good at what they do. So I'll start with that, and now let me ask a question. I mean, some of the stuff that was on the research, really, I could sort of, on the market research side, I could sum up really with the phrase of, treat me with a little bit of dignity and politeness, which, whenever I'm doing research, certainly when I'm interviewing anybody, patients included, I try and do, and I imagine most other interviewers try and do. I guess the question is, how often as an industry do we get that right?
Hmm. Well, I mean, if they're still asking for, being that making it convenient and accessible and being empathetic and everything, somewhere, somehow it might not be getting through to the patients, right? And
Yeah,
so
well, that's what I was wondering. Yeah.
so I think for the, generally, we've created or assembled this community of patients who want to be involved in research. But as soon as someone, if they were to have a bad experience, they're never coming back. Like they're never doing another interview, they're never doing another survey. And, to, in a rare community, you don't have that many people to let go. So it's so important. We make every effort to, make things easy for the patients and help connect them with the clients in the best way possible. But then our job is done, right? We don't know what happens beyond that. And, every moderator I know is so great and so kind. And, and I would assume they all, do the right thing with patients. But like I said, if they're still asking for that, be empathetic and provide me with some information and help me, feel like I'm part of something bigger. I think we need to do a better job of treating patients the way we would want to be treated.
Yeah. Thank you. Useful.
Thanks, Bruce.
Just a quick, it's probably more of a comment than a question, Pam. And I'm just reflecting on one of the key things that your patients that were used in market research commented on as being important to them, and that is understanding their condition. And I just wondered whether this happens already, or whether there is value in thinking about giving some brief training to the researchers about the condition that the patients that they're going to be speaking to actually are experiencing. So, for example, and along with Gordon, I've worked with Fabry disease in the past, and I know with some, in fact, I worked with Fabry for 15 years. I know with some patients, there's a little bit of potentially cognitive impairment, if you will. So they might want a little bit of extra thinking time when they're asked a question. They may well, not just in Fabry, but many rare diseases, many diseases across the board, tire a little bit more easily than you or I might. And I just thought, if the researchers were aware of that, they might actually choose a different pace, or they might, allow somebody a bit more thinking time. And I guess I was wondering whether that was something that happened.
I think that's really important, Sarah, because it is, to your point with Fabry and the example I used, she was exhausted
Yeah.
from traveling back and forth and back and forth. And had somebody thought about that impact, or done a little bit of pre-work before they designed the protocol,
Yeah.
they might have chosen to do it differently. And I think that's true in every condition. There's something that, whether it's a physical impact, it's a cognitive or mental challenge, whatever it is that, you know, uh, in an interview, for example, you might not have the answer right away, right?
Yeah.
You might need a few minutes to think, or, and in a focus group, it might seem like you're just not contributing, but you have something to contribute. So the moderator really needs to understand
Yeah.
how that disease impacts the patient so that they can ask the questions appropriately and work with them in a way that is best for the patient. And, the hope is that if you are working in a specific disease area, you would know that and understand it. Um, but again, based on those results, I'm thinking that, that doesn't always happen.
Yeah.
And that, compassion and understanding for that disease
Yeah.
area isn't always there and should be.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you. Thank you, Pam.
Thank you, sir, for the question. So we have a small queue of ex-GSK colleagues, but to go to Sanjay first, actually. Hi, Sanjay.
Thanks, Nigel. Good discussion. Pam, I have a question in terms of patient advocacy groups. Do you see, particularly in the rare patient area, that the impact of the value of those, and how in your research you found out the application of those particular groups?
So we work with advocacy groups in a couple of different ways. We go to their events, of course, but we also work with smaller advocacy and support groups as referral partners. So they help us to connect with patients who want to participate in research. Interestingly, this is about 3 or 4 years ago, we did another study internally about patient advocacy groups and participation in groups. And it was interesting to me, only about 50% of the patients said that they were working with an advocacy group in their disease area, which I thought was surprising. But, their reasons for not doing it is, one, they didn't know about a group in their area, or in their disease area. They didn't have time to do it. They, weren't interested for whatever reason. We hear a lot, from organizations and pharma that, oh, well, we're partnered with an advocacy group, and that's great. And advocacy groups are fabulous. Um, but you're only reaching part of the patient that group if that's the only group you're going to, in terms of working with an advocacy group. And again, we work with lots of them. And but I think supplementing our outreach to patients in other ways is also important, because not all those patients want to be involved with an advocacy group. Did I answer your question, Sanjay?
Yeah, you did. I just curious in terms of financial assistance or help for travel, anything. I worked in oncology group as Nigel said, at GSK, and then we used to work with several of those. In some patient areas, a big, market or big number of patients are much higher compared to rare patient population. So just curious the Fabry disease or other disease area that you work with, was that helpful in getting some patient assistance?
So those, what we're really do is we're a matchmaker. So we're connecting the patients with the researchers, and we are not necessarily privy to how they're getting their compensation if they are. Um, but I don't know the companies that I know that do provide that, help them with compensation and help them with like their um, prepaid cards and things like that. Were not specifically advocacy groups, the ones that I know of. So there may be groups that do help to pay for like clinical trial travel and things like that. But it isn't something, information that I've been privy to.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sanjay. So quickly to Rahela. Hi, Rahela.
Hi. First, thank you very much, Pam, for excellent presentation, and also for really progressing with very valuable element for our patients. I would like to share my final signatory experience that supports your initiative. As final signatory, I get the opportunity to approve different marketing research. And at several occasions, actually, I got some marketing research where questionnaire was very long. It dives deep into psychology of the patients, and from the questions and the whole thing that patients should do, I understood that they could be pushed into depression, and the primary indication had a comorbidity depression. In the same time, physicians sending those patients for market research were made blind for the questionnaire and the whole process, because it was apparently IP of that agency, that market research that was developed with very renowned psychiatrists. So I demanded some changes in the process, protecting patients. So those who are not vulnerable will be sent, and also after the research, appropriate follow-up with appropriately trained and educated person will be done with patients to ensure that they didn't experience any, let's say, side effects of the questionnaire. And I also limited the time of the questionnaire. And I think this what you're doing, raising awareness, pointing that researchers should be putting themselves in the shoes of patients and thinking, is this patient capable to go through entire exercise, and what impact that exercise will have on that patient's physically and mentally, and how I will follow up further and help them is very important. What I was facing was a few years ago, and it was quite difficult. Thankfully, my colleagues, healthcare professionals, backed me up, so I was successful in driving the whole initiative to meet both company and patient interest. But thank you very much. You are doing really valuable work. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's amazing, and I hope that more people do what you did, because they're, some of the questions that we ask in market research are really important to us to, to make decisions, right? But some of those things could be very jarring to a patient. So thinking about that and making sure that there's appropriate follow-up is really important, and I'm glad to hear you did it. I hope other people do that too.
Yeah, thank
you. Okay.
Sort of related to that, if I could jump on another question, or not a question, but a thought. So Pam, your organization helped with a study that actually I ran a few years back, but actually it was for Paul. Paul was actually my client at the time. And it was in the mental health space. And I'm going to say this was by happy accident rather than design, perhaps, what I'm about to say. But actually, for our motive, we wanted to have a sequence of conversations. The logic being, if we had a sequence over time, we would build more trust and it would be more comfortable all round, and we'd probably learn more. I didn't think of this at the time, but I suspect from the patient's point of view, having a sequence of conversations is probably quite a good thing. You could have sort of fairly benign conversations at the beginning of a sequence, but actually as trust builds and comfort builds, I guess you could have more in-depth conversations without necessarily making someone feel uncomfortable as you get to know them a little bit better. And I don't see that happening that much in market research. Market research, to my mind, always seems to have the mentality of dive in once, get as many people as possible, get them through the sheep dip process, and then, write a presentation, which, I find a bit odd, really. I mean, the way Paul and I tend to approach the task is to speak to less people, but speak to them more often in a bit of a sequence. And actually, it's astonishing what comes out once people start to trust you. So it's just a better experience all around. And that's the same whether it's patients, doctors, payers, whoever. I just think it's a better way of approaching the task, I think.
I agree. I think it's I like the sheep dip thing that you said, but the but the for the market research is always in a hurry, right? We always have to we have to get this out next week. We need the patients to do the survey this week, and everything's market driven and very has to be done really fast. But to your point, when think about any relationship in your life, if you want to have an in-depth relationship with someone and really understand them, you can't just talk to them now and walk away, right? And particularly in some of these, disease areas, they're very, it's very private. It's your body, right? It's very private and personal information, and sharing that information isn't easy. Even if you know that it's something that might help you or help others or develop a treatment, it still is hard to sometimes talk about. So having that iterative discussion, I'm sure makes a huge difference because, I talked to you today, and then next time I talk to you, I feel like, hey, I know that guy. I already talked to him about this. And it's easier for me to open up and easier for me to share some of my experiences.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's our experience. I mean, our experience is that viewed through the lens of the client, well, actually, most clients, if you explain that to them, actually are very receptive to it. So I then sort of think I put it on the agencies, actually. And secondly, actually, from a purely hard commercial lens, you learn vastly more when you take that approach. And yet, actually, at the same time, I think it's better for the recipient that's sort of on the respondent, I guess, on the other end of the conversation. So anyway, just a thought.
Absolutely. Well, the one thing maybe learning out of that is, I think sometimes researchers are afraid to, if their client comes to them and says, oh, we need to do 25 interviews with patients with this condition, they say yes. And not because you want the job, right? And so like, okay, sure, I'll do that. But, maybe thinking a little bit more about, some of this data and what makes things a little better for the patients and what might yield, better and deeper results. Maybe don't just say yes when the client says, let's do 25 interviews. Because who's the researcher? You or the client? You. So, it might really be it might, maybe part of the lesson is, challenge and give your client other options that they might not even think about or know about. And as you said, they might be, quite amenable to it if you actually share the reason it might give them better information. It's worth giving it a try. Any other questions or comments or?
No other hands up.
Okay.
So unless there's any burning issues, we should probably bring this fantastic discussion.
Lots of positive comments in the chat. Lots of people said it's a brilliant talk. So thank you, Pam.
I'm so glad.
I was going to put out one piece of feedback immediately, Pam. I do actually agree with this 100% from Doug Neely. Actually, I think Doug's just left us. We say great stuff, or good stuff, Pam, and you have the most soothing radio voice.
Oh, that's lovely. Maybe I have another career in me yet.
I think so. So thank you, Pam, for that. So I guess just to round up a little bit also, I mean, obviously a patient-centric strategy makes perfect sense for industry, of course. And I think from what you said, much more to do around that. Just maybe often just simple things like getting logistics right, making sure we're not putting too much into protocols and putting patients off actually participating in clinical trials and getting their feedback around protocols, etc., and try and build that relationship. Have an ongoing conversation with patients during their journey on clinical trials or through market research. So it's important messages coming out there, I think. And so thank you for sharing your research and your view today. It's much appreciated across the group. The feedback's very positive, of course. So with that, hope to see everybody next time. We'll be looking at, I think, market research next time with Joe Kogan, and how to bring that to life in a creative way, I think, with John next time in a few weeks. So look out for that. Look forward to seeing you all next time. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Have a nice evening.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.